My name is Daniel Knox. I'm 37 years old, a quiet builder in a world obsessed with loud promises. For 3 years, I poured everything into a logistics AI platform: code, strategy, branding, even investor decks. I worked late out of my garage, surviving on black coffee and self-belief. All I needed was one big meeting, just one shot. And I thought I'd found a partner who believed in it as much as I did. His name was Brandon Shaw. We met during a tech networking retreat. He was polished, charismatic, and always talking about exits. I was cautious, but when someone tells you we'll build it together, it's easy to believe. I let him into my codebase, walked him through the algorithm, gave him access to mock-ups, the pitch deck, even the investor contact I'd been warming up for 6 months. 2 weeks before the meeting, he went quiet. I found out through LinkedIn. His status update punched me in the chest, proud to announce our logistics solution has just secured $3.2 million in Series A funding. Excited for what's next. There it was, my idea, my tech, my slides, rebranded with his name on the front. The logo was different, but the bones were mine. He hadn't improved anything, just stolen it and sold it faster than I could even react. I didn't call him, didn't rage. I simply closed the browser, stared at the wall, and thought about every piece of leverage I had left. And I had more than he realized. Because Brandon, he was a showman, but I was the architect. I didn't need to take him down in public. I just needed to pull the right wires behind the scenes. That night, I opened a notebook I hadn't touched in months. The backup architecture he never saw, the version I didn't share, the kill switch, the licensing traps, the paper trail, and just like that, my anger evaporated. This wouldn't be revenge. This would be restoration. Clean, quiet, absolute. When someone steals your work, they assume the product is the prize. But Brandon forgot something critical. I didn't just build code. I built systems. I knew every dependency, every data pipe, every line of logic that held that product together. What he pitched to investors was a skeleton built on a codebase I had protected with smart, invisible thorns. Years ago, I had buried license checks deep in the framework, redundant enough to be missed, subtle enough to be legal. He thought he'd stolen a house. What he didn't know was that the foundation had a fuse built in. The second I saw his announcement, I checked the access logs. He had cloned the repo weeks ago. No new commit since. That meant he hadn't changed the architecture. He was still running my version, with all the built-in tripwires. If he tried to scale it, the framework would begin throwing errors. Not immediately, but slowly, quietly, and each one would trace back to a software license tied to my name. And the best part, I held the only legal copy of that license. Still, I didn't trigger anything. Not yet. I needed to watch. See how far he'd run with it. I created a burner LinkedIn account, followed his new company, watched the press cycle unfold. Investors loved him. Podcasts, panels. He was everywhere. I even caught him using my original pitch word for word in an interview. We're automating operational bottlenecks for small businesses using predictive AI and time-aware routing. I'd written that line 2 years ago in my notebook while eating leftover pizza at 3 a.m. Now it was fueling his rocket. But rockets only look beautiful before they explode. I reached out to a contact I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Kara, a compliance officer at one of the venture firms Brandon was bragging about. We'd worked together briefly when she consulted on another project of mine. I didn't accuse. I didn't whine. I just sent her a friendly message with a file attached. Timestamps, code fragments, and a license agreement showing the product Brandon had demoed wasn't legally his to sell. I didn't even say it was stolen, just asked her to verify alignment. A professional red flag raised with precision. 2 days later, Kara replied, "Thanks, Dan," quietly forwarding this where it needs to go. That was all she said. And that was all I needed. The dominoes were lined up now. I didn't have to knock them down myself, just had to stand back and let gravity work. And Brandon, he had no idea the floor beneath him was about to open. I went back to my day job. I answered emails, took a walk, and slept like a stone for the first time in months. Because revenge doesn't always wear fire and fury. Sometimes it wears patience. And mine was surgical. The first ripple hit a week later. It came in the form of a LinkedIn post, not from Brandon, but from one of his engineers. A short, vague message about technical instability and escalating system errors. I read it twice, slowly. Then I smiled. I knew exactly what they were hitting. The internal build of the logistics software wasn't just tripping over a few bugs. It was unraveling. The licensing framework I had installed would begin disabling key features after a silent verification check failed. It wasn't malware. It was legally protected architecture with time-based limits. Fail to verify, and functions would fail one by one. Brandon's pitch deck had promised frictionless scaling. So when his clients started reporting service interruptions, the questions began, first quietly, in Slack threads and customer support tickets, then louder in reviews, Reddit forums, and tweets. One client posted a screenshot of the error log. I recognized my own code in it, buried in a stack trace that exposed more than Brandon wanted out in the wild. He was using my original build, and he hadn't even obfuscated it. It was like watching someone wear your clothes to a job interview and pretend they tailored them. Still, I didn't gloat, I didn't say a word. But I noticed the change. His LinkedIn updates went from frequent to non-existent. No new interviews, no new partnerships. The last photo he posted was from a conference where he'd been announced as a keynote speaker. He never showed up. Then came the podcast episode. A niche tech podcast I listened to out of habit dropped a bombshell midweek. Heard whispers that one of the fastest-growing logistics startups might have built their tech on unlicensed code. They didn't name him. They didn't have to. I got a call from Kara the next day. "It's unraveling," she said plainly. "You were smart. You left a trail, not too obvious, but undeniable." She paused. "The firm's pulling back. Brandon doesn't know yet." I thanked her. Brief, grateful, professional. We both knew I hadn't asked for revenge. I'd asked for truth. And truth, when timed right, dismantles arrogance without raising its voice. Brandon finally reached out to me 3 days later. The message was short. "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time. There was no apology, no ownership, just desperation. I waited 6 hours, then replied, "What would we talk about?" He responded almost instantly, "I think we had a miscommunication." That was his word. Miscommunication. Like I'd dropped my work in his lap, and he accidentally made millions. I agreed to meet, not because I wanted closure, but because I wanted to look him in the eye when he realized he'd built an empire on sand, and that the quiet man he stole from was the one holding the tide. We met at a rooftop bar downtown. He picked the place, polished, high-end, the kind of spot where people wear ambition like cologne. I wore a navy jacket, kept my hands in my pockets, and walked in with the calm of someone who no longer needed to prove a thing. Brandon was already there, pacing near the railing with a drink he wasn't sipping. When he saw me, he straightened up like this was a negotiation. That was his first mistake. I wasn't there to trade. I was there to bury what he thought would never surface. He forced a smile, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Dan, long time." His tone was light, but I could see it in his jaw, the tension, the unraveling, the creeping realization that the walls were closing in. I sat slowly. "You said you wanted to talk." He looked around, like someone might be listening. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." I let the silence stretch. You mean the part where you stole my code, rebranded my idea, pitched it to my contacts, and used my slide deck word. He blinked. Okay, look, things moved fast. I didn't think. That's clear, I cut in. Because if you had, you'd know that what you built wasn't just an idea, it was a system. And you never asked how deep that system went. He frowned. I didn't do anything illegal. I almost laughed. You didn't read the license terms you clicked agree to twice. Every time that backend runs without a verification token, you're in violation. Every client you onboarded, every API call, logged. Traceable, mine. He went pale. You're bluffing. I leaned forward, voice low. Then why are investors pulling out? Why are engineers quitting? Why are compliance officers returning your calls with silence? He started to speak, then stopped. That's when the mask cracked. His fingers drummed the edge of the table. What do you want, Dan? Money? Equity? A public apology? I smiled, slow and deliberate. I don't want anything from you, Brandon. That's the part you never understood. I already got what I came for. Your illusion is collapsing. Your story is falling apart. And I didn't need to raise my voice once. He stared at me, stunned. I can fix this, he said. But it came out as a question, not a plan. I stood. You don't fix theft, you get replaced. Quietly, completely. I slid a card across the table, the name of my new startup. Same tech, legally protected, investors already in talks. You stole the draft. I kept the masterpiece. His eyes followed the card like it was a death sentence. Don't call me again, I said calmly. Next time you'll be talking to lawyers. I walked away from that table without looking back. Because there's a moment when revenge stops being emotional and becomes execution. It didn't take long. Within 2 weeks of our rooftop meeting, Brandon's company issued a sudden technical restructuring notice to all clients. The phrasing was vague, but the reality was clear. The product no longer functioned. Investors withdrew. Developers leaked fragments of emails. One engineer tweeted, "Turns out when you steal someone's house, the foundation isn't yours to stand on." It went viral. Within a month, the media caught wind. Brandon stopped showing up to anything. The man who once made magazine covers was now a ghost in his own domain. Meanwhile, I moved quietly. With a new name, a clean build, and no borrowed code, I launched my platform publicly. The response was immediate, not because of the tech, though it was solid, but because of the integrity behind it. I had something Brandon never understood, a real blueprint, not just of the software, but of trust, of vision. I wasn't chasing buzz. I was building something meant to last, and people noticed. One by one, Brandon's ex-clients reached out, curious, open, ready to partner with the one who had built it right the first time. What surprised me most wasn't the professional comeback, it was the emotional stillness. I thought I'd feel vindicated, triumphant. But what I actually felt was quiet. Not hollow, but whole, like I had finally walked out of a long, dim hallway and into clean air. Revenge had never been the goal. It had simply been the natural result of standing my ground, refusing to let a thief rewrite the future I had carved with my own hands. I didn't need an audience to watch him fall. I just needed the door to close behind him. Brandon tried to reach me again. First through a mutual contact, then by email. He never apologized, just offered a conversation. I deleted both messages. Some doors stay shut, and not out of pettiness, but peace. You don't need to re-enter the fire once you've rebuilt the house, and that's what I had done. Piece by piece, line by line, not louder, just stronger, cleaner, unshakable. I started mentoring a few young engineers. Soon after, one of them, bright and hopeful, asked me what I'd do differently if I could go back. I thought about it. Nothing, I said. Every betrayal teaches you two things: how to protect what you build, and how to recognize the ones who never deserved access in the first place. He nodded, like he understood. Maybe he did, maybe he will, and that's enough for me. It's strange, the way real closure arrives. Not with some grand apology or dramatic reconciliation, but with silence. A clean, intentional silence that doesn't beg to be filled. That's what I found in the months after Brandon's collapse. The emails stopped, the whispers faded, the industry quietly adjusted. People moved on, but not without remembering what happened, not without knowing the truth. His name no longer opened doors, mine. It started appearing in rooms I had only once imagined standing in. The greatest victory wasn't that I won. It's that I didn't have to destroy myself to do it. I didn't stoop. I didn't scream. I didn't chase headlines or clap back online. I simply built. Let the facts speak. Let the stolen pieces fail on their own, while I rose with what was mine, and only mine. Brandon will likely spend years trying to rewrite what happened. He might even convince a few people, but the ones who matter. They saw, they knew, and most importantly, they remembered who stayed silent and who stayed standing. I've learned something since then, something they don't teach you in business school or TED Talks. Revenge doesn't require a spotlight, it requires precision, patience, and a quiet refusal to hand your narrative over to the people who tried to erase you. That's what power really looks like, not vengeance with flames, but the steady warmth of a fire you built yourself, one that keeps burning long after the noise has died. To anyone listening who's been betrayed, stolen from, or underestimated, hear me clearly. You don't have to beg to be seen. You don't have to rage to be right. Protect your work, guard your story, and when the time is right, take back your seat without asking permission. They'll notice your absence, but they'll never recover from your return. And if you've ever been the quiet one, the overlooked builder, the brain behind the show, this is your reminder. They only steal from what they fear. Let them fear you, and then outlast them. Subscribe for more true stories of silent power, earned revenge, and how the calmest one in the room is usually the one rewriting history.